Please, just give me 5 minutes. He came all this way for me," my fiancée said after letting go of my hand at our wedding and walking toward her ex. I didn't call her name or follow her. I asked the photographer for 3 time-stamped photos. When the email reached all 140 guests, she went pale at the second photo and immediately called me. She said that standing in the doorway of our own wedding venue, in the dress we had chosen together on a Tuesday afternoon in February, with 140 people seated behind her waiting for the ceremony to continue, the man she was walking toward was not me. She never lied to me. She just never chose me. I spent a year planning a wedding before I finally understood the difference. By Thursday morning, 3 days after that door closed, every person who had been sitting in those chairs would find an email in their inbox. Some of them were her colleagues. Some of them had signed professional contracts with her name on them. This is what happened before Thursday. I met Sophie 3 years before the wedding at a corporate event I had been contracted to attend, and she had been hired to run. She was the event coordinator for the agency managing the conference, and the first thing I noticed was that she was the only person in the room who already knew where every table was going before the venue staff had finished arranging them. When the AV system failed 20 minutes before the keynote, she fixed it without raising her voice and without pulling anyone else into the problem. She just solved it. I found that difficult to look away from. We started dating 6 months after that. She was the kind of person who remembered things, the name of a restaurant I had mentioned once in passing, the project deadline I had told her I was anxious about, the name of my supervisor I had brought up exactly once in a conversation about something else entirely. She kept a mental file on the people she cared about, and once you were in it, you stayed. After 2 years, I proposed in the kitchen of the apartment we had just moved into together, and she said yes before I had finished asking. There were 2 things I noticed during our engagement that I filed away without examining too closely. The first was a name I caught once on her phone screen, Ryan. She explained it without hesitation: an ex-boyfriend, years ago, long finished, nothing that needed discussion. Her voice was level, and she didn't look away, so I accepted it. The second was that twice in the months before the wedding, she canceled plans with me to see what she called old friends, no names given, and both times she came home quieter than she had left, and I noticed but didn't ask. I had decided Sophie processed certain things on her own schedule, and I thought I was being patient. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday in June. The venue was an old stone building with ceilings high enough that sound traveled back to you at twice the volume. The first 20 minutes of the ceremony went exactly as planned. The music started on time, and when Sophie came down the aisle, she looked like someone who had already made her decision. I remember noticing that specifically, not happiness, not nerves. She looked settled. The doors at the back of the room opened at 12 minutes past 2. I heard it before I saw it, the wrong sound for that space. A wooden door catching the frame on the way in, the kind of noise that does not belong in a ceremony. Every head in the room turned at once. The man who came through those doors was not dressed for a wedding. He was in dark jeans and a jacket, and his eyes traveled straight across the room without stopping at anyone except Sophie. Sophie. His voice carried the full length of the room without effort. Please don't do this. Come back to me. I love you. 140 people went silent at the same time. I counted 3 seconds before anything moved. The row nearest the aisle shifted. A woman 2 pews back raised a hand to her mouth. I was aware of all of it in the sharp, peripheral way you become aware of the edges of a room when the center of it has dropped out from under you. Sophie turned her head toward the back of the room. I want to be precise about what I saw on her face, because I have thought about it since. It was not panic. Panic is immediate and moves without direction. What I saw moved slower and was aimed directly at him. She turned back to me. Her mouth opened, and she started a sentence she didn't finish. I'm sorry, I need to, and then she let go of my hand. There was no gradual loosening. It was there, and then it was not. She walked toward him. She didn't run, didn't hesitate. She moved the way people move when they have already decided, and I stood at the altar and watched her cross the room and did not say her name and did not move. She stopped at the side door and turned back once. Not at the guests, not at the priest. At me. Please, just give me 5 minutes. He came all this way for me. The door closed behind her. Not loudly. That was what I kept returning to afterward, how quietly it closed, as though she hadn't wanted to make a scene. I stood where I was. Someone coughed in the 3rd row, and in that silence the sound traveled the full length of the room like something fracturing. I did not look at the guests. I did not look at the door. I looked straight ahead, and something inside me went quiet and started measuring exactly what I was looking at. Marcus had been standing to my left for the entire ceremony. He was the first person to move after the door closed, and the first thing he said was not something comforting. It was, "We need to get you out of this room first." We went through a service corridor behind the altar and into a storage room, folding chairs stacked against one wall, a folding table with someone's abandoned coffee cup sitting on it. Marcus pulled the door shut and said, "Tell me what you need." I told him I didn't know. He nodded as though that was a perfectly reasonable answer, and then he started asking questions instead. What was the photographer's name? Had Sophie signed the catering contract, or had I? Who was the venue booking under? They were not the questions of someone trying to make me feel better. Marcus was a corporate lawyer who spent his professional life identifying what was damaged and determining what could still be retrieved. That was the lens he applied to everything, and he was applying it now. "Did she sign the catering contract, or did you?" he asked. "I did," I said. "Both names, but my signature." He nodded, and I understood then, not from any one thing he said, but from the fact that every question he asked had a logical successor, that he already knew what was possible here, and that I didn't, and that the distance between those two things was exactly where he intended to work. We drove to Marcus's apartment that evening. He sat up at the kitchen table with his laptop and sent one email to the photographer while I sat on the couch and didn't ask what he was writing. The photographer replied within the hour. 3 photographs were selected. Ryan coming through the back doors of the church, Sophie releasing my hand at the altar, and Sophie standing beside Ryan in the side doorway. Each photograph had a timestamp embedded in the file. Marcus printed the email thread and set it beside the laptop. He asked me for the guest list. I had it on my phone, a spreadsheet Sophie and I had built together over 2 evenings, 140 names with email addresses beside each one. I read them aloud, one at a time, while Marcus typed. Some of the names I recognized as her professional contacts, vendors she worked with regularly, a director at her agency. I read those names the same as the others. None of them surprised me. I had helped build this list. When he closed the laptop, he said, "I'll send it tomorrow morning. Read the paragraph first and tell me if anything in it is factually wrong." I read it. Nothing was. By Thursday morning, every person who had sat in that room would have a reason to check their inbox. 3 days after the wedding that didn't happen, on a Thursday morning at 9, an email arrived in 140 inboxes simultaneously. Sophie's agency occupied the 4th floor of a glass-fronted office building in the financial district. The space was fully open plan, no interior walls, no private offices, just rows of desks visible through floor-to-ceiling windows from the shared corridor outside. Transparency was a stated company value. It appeared in their recruitment materials. Sophie's desk sat in the center of the floor, equidistant from the exterior windows and the interior wall, with nothing between her and the colleagues on either side. She was at her desk when the email arrived. Her phone was face down beside her keyboard. Her monitor was on, but she was not looking at it. The email went out at 9:04. Marcus had written a single paragraph. No preamble, no emotional language, no explanation of who was sending it or why. Just a statement of what had occurred, with 3 photographs attached. The subject line read, "June 14th for those who were present." The sender name was Marcus, followed by his full professional title. At first glance, it read like professional correspondence from a lawyer, and nothing in it could be challenged without challenging the photographs, and the photographs carried timestamps. The first person Sophie watched read it was the woman at the desk immediately to her left. Her name was Qley. She had worked at the agency for 2 years and had attended the wedding as Sophie's guest. She opened the email while Sophie was still looking at her monitor without actually reading it. Qley scrolled slowly, stopped, and the expression on her face shifted in the particular controlled way that faces shift when someone lands on something they don't know how to process. She looked once towards Sophie's desk. Then she picked up her laptop and relocated, quietly, to a standing desk near the far windows. She did not look back. Sophie opened the email because she recognized Marcus's name in the sender field. Qley told me, several weeks later, that Sophie's face went through 3 distinct phases in the space of about 90 seconds. The first was something close to relief. She opened it with the expression of someone who expected a private message, something addressed specifically to her. The second phase came when she scrolled to the top of the recipient list and saw her name alongside 139 others, including the director of her agency and 2 vendor contacts she had worked with regularly for the past 18 months. The third phase was the absence of expression. Sophie's face went neutral in the deliberate, particular way that faces go neutral when the person behind them has decided to stop processing in public. She scrolled to the first photograph. Ryan coming through the back doors of the church, mid-step, with every head in the frame turned toward him. She stopped scrolling at it. She scrolled to the second photograph. It was the altar. It was her hand releasing mine. The photographer had been shooting in burst mode, and the image caught the exact moment of the gesture, her fingers uncurling, my hand where it had been. The timestamp embedded in the corner read 2:14 p.m. She looked at it long enough that Claire, across the room, noticed she had stopped moving. She called me. "Why would you do this?" She said when I answered. "This is private. It happened in front of 140 people, Sophie," I said. "There's nothing private about it. You're trying to destroy me." I sent 3 photographs and 1 paragraph. The paragraph is factual. You can verify every sentence. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "This is going to cost me my job." "I didn't write anything untrue," I said, and ended the call. Claire told me later that while Sophie was on the phone, 3 other phones at nearby desks had buzzed in quick succession, people who had been at the wedding sharing the email, the way threads move when something in them needs to be talked about. By the time Sophie set her phone back on the desk, the room had taken on the specific quality of a space where something cannot be unread. 2 people who had been in conversation when the email first arrived had stopped talking. One of them was looking at her phone. The other was looking at Sophie. At 10:05, a calendar invitation appeared in Sophie's inbox from her director's assistant. The subject line read, "Catch up, Conference Room B, 10 a.m. A same day, no context meeting request from the director meant one specific thing at their agency, and everyone on the floor who saw the notification forwarded to Sophie's screen would have known immediately what it was. The man at the desk to Sophie's right had been on a call when the email first went out and had missed most of the first wave. At some point, he pulled out one earbud, looked in Sophie's direction with the careful, neutral expression of someone who has decided not to be visibly adjacent to whatever is happening, and said nothing. The meeting ran 47 minutes. When Sophie came out of Conference Room B, she did not return to her desk. She walked to the elevator bank and stood in the corridor with her back against the wall, looking down at the phone in her hands. Through the glass front of the office, her entire team could see her standing there. The elevator opened once while she was standing in that position. She did not move toward it. Claire called me. At 3 that afternoon. Sophie had left the office shortly after noon and hadn't returned. The director's meeting had not resulted in an immediate dismissal. Claire was clear about that, but 2 of Sophie's regular vendor partners had sent emails that afternoon requesting to be assigned a different point of contact going forward. Claire told me this not because she was taking sides, she said, but because she thought I had the right to know, and she wasn't sure who else would pass it along. I thanked her, put the phone down, and made coffee. That was about all I felt like doing. The venue, the catering, the florals, everything had been non-refundable past a certain point, and we were past it. Marcus had spent 2 days working through what could be retrieved. The honest answer was that most of it couldn't be, and I had known that since Saturday. By Tuesday, I had stopped adding it up. I had gotten precise about what I was actually losing versus what I was choosing to let go of, and the second category turned out to be longer than the first. What I was thinking about by Wednesday evening was not what had already happened. It was what came next. On Friday, 4 days after the wedding, I received an email from Sophie. It was long. The structure of it told me she had gone through more than one draft. The core of it was 2 arguments. That the email Marcus had sent constituted a deliberate attempt to damage her professionally, and that what she had done at the ceremony was not a choice but a crisis response. The kind of automatic reaction that happens when the brain encounters something it hasn't been prepared for. She wrote that if I had given her the 5 minutes she asked for, she would have come back inside. She wanted me to understand that. I read it twice. I did not reply. 8 days after the wedding, she posted to her social media accounts. She did not name anyone. She wrote about betrayal from someone she had trusted, about having her worst moment used against her, about the particular cruelty of being held accountable at the point of greatest vulnerability. The post was carefully worded, and it was also visible to every person who had received Marcus's email, and some of them had by then shared the story in their own networks, which meant Sophie's post was reaching people who already had the original photographs as context. The response in the comments was not what she had been looking for. It was the response of people who had seen the photographs and were now watching someone describe herself as the victim of documentation. Two of the mutual friends who had attended the wedding called me within 48 hours of the post going up. Neither of them, I found out later, had called Sophie. The post stayed up for 6 days and then came down. She did not address the removal and did not post anything in its place. The silence after it disappeared was more visible than the post had been. I heard about Ryan first from Daniel. Daniel had known both of us for several years. He had been part of the same extended social circle as Sophie and me when we first met, and he had been at the wedding. He called not to check in, he said, but because he had seen something on Instagram he thought I should know about, and he didn't think I'd come across it myself since I had stopped checking social media the week after the wedding. Ryan's account was public. He had posted a check-in from a music venue in a city 5 hours from where our wedding had taken place. The post had gone up 4 days after the ceremony. Daniel read me the caption. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked him to send me the screenshot. He came all this way. Sophie's accounts had been quiet since her post came down. In the weeks after the wedding, she had deleted every photograph of the two of us from her profile. Claire had mentioned it in passing, not as a pointed piece of information but as something she had simply noticed. There were no new photographs of Ryan on Sophie's account. There were no new photographs of anyone. The profile of someone who had been consistently active for years had gone to a particular kind of silence that is different from privacy. It was the silence of a person who doesn't yet know what version of their life they are presenting to the world. There were also things I did not hear from Daniel, which turned out to matter more than what I did hear. I did not hear that Ryan and Sophie had gotten back together in any formal sense. I did not hear that he had stayed in the city, or that anything resembling a plan had existed beyond his entrance through those doors. Daniel didn't have that information because, as far as anyone could tell, it didn't exist. Some people arrive with a gesture and nothing behind it. I noted all of that and moved on. 6 weeks after the wedding that didn't happen, I called the landlord of the apartment Sophie and I had co-signed. Her name was Mrs. Kessler. She was in her early 60s, and I had spoken to her exactly twice before, once when we signed the lease, once when a fitting under the kitchen sink needed attention. I explained the situation as plainly as I could. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, "Well, that's a hell of a thing." She asked if I was keeping the apartment or not. I told her I was. Not because I had strong feelings about that particular apartment. I said yes because I needed somewhere concrete to start, and at that point any specific place was better than the idea of beginning the search over. Mrs. Kessler said she would send amended paperwork in the morning. The whole call took about 4 minutes. I made dinner that evening in a kitchen designed for 2 people and ate at the table by the window where Sophie had planned to put a plant. I hadn't put a plant there. I had put my work bag there instead, and it had been sitting in that spot for 6 weeks. Daniel sent the screenshot on a Tuesday evening in early August. Sophie had chosen a man who drove 5 hours, walked into our wedding, declared his love in front of 140 people, and was photographed publicly with someone new 43 days later. I want to be precise about what she had walked away from a year of planning together to find. It was a gesture. It lasted 43 days. The screenshot was from Ryan's public account, him at an outdoor concert, his arm around a woman, her profile tagged in the caption. He had made no effort to keep it private. He had made nothing private. Daniel had found it by checking Ryan's page out of what he described as simple curiosity, and he forwarded it with a single line. "Thought you should see this." I looked at it for a few seconds. Then I put the phone face down on the kitchen table. The following week, Daniel mentioned something he had heard through Anna, a mutual friend who had stayed in closer contact with Sophie since the wedding. Sophie had attended a networking event in their industry, something she would previously have arrived at as one of the primary organizers. This time, she had come early and left before the cocktail hour, and her name did not appear on any of the vendor or coordinator lists for the event. Anna told Daniel that when Sophie walked in, she had taken a table near the door, the kind of seat you take when you are not yet sure how long you are staying. Daniel said he didn't have all the details, just what Anna had passed along. What he knew for certain was what Sophie had texted Anna the night before the event. The message was 5 words. "I think I made a mistake." Not an explanation. Not a long message that had been drafted and redrafted. 5 words at 11 in the evening, the night before she walked into a room where she used to be one of the most recognizable names on the attendee list. Daniel said Anna had looked at the message for a while before responding and hadn't known what to say. I read it, set the phone down on the kitchen table, and sat there listening to the city outside doing whatever cities do at 11 on a Tuesday night. Somewhere a bus went past. I didn't move for a while, In the morning, I would call Marcus about the last of the paperwork. That was all. I kept the apartment. It is smaller than it seemed when we were planning to fill it together, and larger than I expected once I stopped needing to account for someone else in the space. Both of those things turned out to be true at the same time, which I found useful in a practical sense. The work bag is still by the window where Sophie had planned to put a plant. I have not bought a plant. I have thought about it twice, and then thought about something else. I am not wiser about what I should have seen sooner or what I should watch for going forward. I have not arrived at a cleaner understanding of why this happened or what it means about whatever comes after it. I am just not carrying something I should have set down a long time before I finally did. It turns out that is different from being better. It turns out that is also enough. I am not wiser. I am just not standing in that doorway anymore, and from here, that is enough to work with.